All right, so we have a test next Thursday. All right, you guys have a test on Thursday, and it's going to go over sections 1.1 to 1.5. So we already did 1.1 to 1.3. We took quizzes on it. I have put the quizzes in the grade book. I will give them back to you probably next Tuesday. We'll go through it, make sure you guys, any questions you have, you can keep them, whatever, in preparation for your test. But this is section 1.4. We talked about it yesterday. It was quadratics. So using the quadratic formula. And we talked about completing the square. Now, you should get to a point to where if you're just given an equation that's a quadratic, or just given an equation in general, and it says solve, you should be able to do that. So what we've done is I've given you the tools, or you've refreshed your memory of tools, of how to solve quadratics. The first thing that we did was factor. We did a lot of factoring, and factoring is pretty much the easiest way to solve if you see the numbers and can figure out the factors and stuff. The second way that we're going to do is completing the square. Now, these first ones that we do, I understand they factor pretty. So if you're given a test that says solve, do it however you want. But if it says solve by factoring, then you have to factor. If it says solve by completing the square, then you need to complete the square. If it says solve using the quadratic formula, use the quadratic formula. Now, somebody asked me last period, well, how come we can't just always use the quadratic formula because it always works? Yes, it does always work. But the quadratic formula is very time consuming. So if you had 10 or 12 questions on a quiz and you use the quadratic formula for all 10 or 12 of them, you won't finish. So it's important that we learn the different steps, the different ways to solve equations, and then you guys can decipher from there. But on your test, I'm going to say, solve number 3 by completing the square. Solve number 7 by using the quadratic formula. I'm going to tell you exactly how I want it done. So let's go through a few, all right? All of this, other than the ones I tell you don't have to do, is due Monday morning. So I'm going to do a bunch with you, and then you guys will have some class time to work, and then you can work over the weekend. But the biggest thing, guys, is practice with this stuff. So let's talk about completing the square. I'm going to change all of my letters to X's because it's just easier for me. But I have p squared plus 14p minus 38 equals 0. Are we in standard form? Okay. What do I have to do with that negative 38? I need to move it to the other side. Circle it, y'all, and draw an arrow. Get in the habit, because you're going to do the same thing every time. And then this won't be so cumbersome, or so you guys won't think, oh my God, there's so many steps. You'll just kind of get into the habit of doing it. So I have x squared plus 14x plus, what am I putting right here? My box. I'm going to complete the square. So I'm putting a square here. We're going to create a perfect square trinomial. And what we do on one side of the equation, we have to do where? So I move negative 38. It becomes positive. And then I have plus my square. Now, we're going to use completing the square when our a term is 1. Is my a term 1 in this sense? Yes. Is x squared coefficient 1? Yes, we're good to go. So let's take that b term, which is positive 14, and we divide it by 2. Now, this is going to tell us everything we need to know. On the left-hand side of the equal sign, to create my perfect square trinomial, this becomes what? What's in my x and then a plus 7. Good, it's a positive 7. Now, x plus 7 quantity squared is the same thing as, what's going to go right here? 49. These two things are now equivalent. We've completed the square. What you add to one side, you do what? You add to the other. Yes, ma'am? All right, so on the left-hand side, we have x plus 7 quantity squared. What's going on the right-hand side? What's 38 plus 49? 87. All right, so now you have done the process of completing the square. Now we're just going to solve an equation. How do you solve this equation? You take the square root. Every single time, guys, you're going to do the same thing. You take the square root of both sides. When you square a square root, it goes away. What do I put in front of my 87? Plus or minus. Good. And then what's the last thing I do? I'm going to move the 7 to the other side, so subtract 7. So my answer is x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 87. That's it. Can you simplify the square root of 87? No. How many solutions do you have here? 2, right? Negative 7 plus the square root of 87. Negative 7 minus the square root of 87. I knew that I was going to have 2 real solutions at this point right here. How come? Because 87 is positive. Good. Good, good, good. Okay, let's look at the next one. Let's look at number 3. Again, I'm going to use x's. Is my a term 1? Yes. Is everything in standard form? Yes. So we're going to go through the process. I'm going to take this constant. I'm going to move it to the other side. So I have x squared plus 14x plus square equals. When I move negative 51 to the other side, it becomes, and then I have plus square. Good job, guys. So again, the process is the exact same. We take our b term. I say 14 divided by 2 equals 7. That's going to tell me everything I need to know. What is my parenthesis? X plus 7 squared on the one side. Good. X plus 7 squared. And then when I square 7, I get 49. What you add to one side, you add to the other. Now, someone asked me last period, and it was an excellent question. Are you always going to put a plus here? How come yes? Because you're squaring a number. Very good. Very good. It's a great question. She said, are we always going to put a plus? And I said, thank you for asking that. Because, guys, when you square a number, if I square negative 7 times negative 7, I still get what? Plus 49. So it's always going to be a plus there. That's good. All right, so now we're going to continue with our process. And I do what to both sides? Take the square root. Wonderful. So I have x plus 7 equals plus or minus what? 10. Oh, no. Oh, no. Guys, all this means is that this factored at the beginning. That's it. You're just going to get 2 whole answers. No big deal. I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides, right? So I have x equals negative 7 plus or minus 10. Well, can I get 2 answers with negative 7 plus or minus 10? Yeah. You have 2 little equations, negative 7 plus 10, which is 3, and negative 7 minus 10, which is negative 17. There's your 2 x's.
Can we keep it as negative 7 plus or minus 10?
No. Good question. Good question. If you can simplify, you guys need to. The chances are not likely that on the quiz or the test, I'm going to give you one that works out nice and pretty like that because it kind of defeats the purpose. Somebody last period was like, I can see already that it factors. Great. I'm glad you guys can see that. Let's just go through the process. Yes.
I'm confused. What did you do with the last part? The negative 7 plus 10?
Here? Because it worked out to be negative 7 plus or minus 10. Like up here, it was negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 87, right? Well, we don't know what the square root of 87 is. So that is simplified. But here, you can actually combine negative 7 and positive 10 and get 3. And negative 7 and negative 10 and get negative 17.
Okay, and so that's the answer.
Yes, those would be your 2 x's. All right, what about 5? Are there factors of 8 that will multiply to give me 8 but add to give me 6? Yes, what are they? 4 and 2. So on a test, if it just said solve, that's what you should try and do first. Don't automatically jump to the quadratic formula. Don't automatically jump to completing the square unless the directions say solve by ba-ba-da-ba-da. But what would I do here? I'm going to move the 8 over. So I have x squared plus 6 plus your box equals negative 8 plus the box. Now it's helpful if it does factor. Right? You guys just told me what are my answers going to be?
X plus 4 and then x plus 2.
So plus 4 plus 2. When I solve it, I'll get negative 4, negative 2. All right, let's see if that works out like that. We can check. That's a good way to check. So take your b term. So it's 6 divided by 2, and I get 3, right? So my parenthesis over here is x plus 3 squared equals, I'm going to add 9 to both sides. Yeah? Okay, so negative 8 plus 9 is 1. So now I'm going to do what? Take the square root. So I have x plus 3 equals, what's the square root of 1? So it's plus or minus 1, right? Then I would subtract 3 from both sides. And I get x equals negative 3 plus or minus 1. Now you go, oh, I can do this. What's negative 3 plus 1? Negative 2. What's negative 3 minus 1? Negative 4, which is what you guys told me at the very beginning. Chances are not very high that I'm going to give you one like that on the quiz or the test where you have to complete the square and it works out nice and pretty. Because you guys know how to factor. Is 7 going to work out nice and pretty? Factors of 15. That'll multiply to give me negative 15, but add to give me 14. 15 and, yeah, there you go. All right, let's look at 9. 9's a little different. How is 9 a little different? There's a 7. All right, you could do this one of two ways. Some of you are going to want to rewrite this as r squared minus 4r minus 98 equals 0. How'd I go from 91 to 98? I moved that 7 over. But then what are we going to do now with the 98? We're going to move it back over, right? Just put it on the table, thanks. So if you want to go ahead and rewrite it and then move it over from the beginning, that's fine. But if you notice that you have a constant on one side of the equal sign, but then you have another constant that you're just going to move over anyways, you can just do that. So this is x squared minus 4x plus the box equals, what's negative 91 when I move it to the other side becomes positive. So 91 and 97 is 98, right? Okay, let's go through our process of completing the square. I take my b term and I say negative 4 divided by 2 equals negative 2. Good. You guys are doing a really good job. So on the left-hand side, what does my parenthesis look like? Minus 2, because it's negative, good, equals, I have to square negative 2, becomes 4, so 98 plus 4 is 102, all right? Now we go through the same process of solving that we've done 27 times already today. What do I do to both sides? Take the square root. When I put the square root on, what goes in front of my answer? Plus or minus. Don't worry about simplifying right this second. Check to see if you can simplify at the very end. We're going to add 2 to both sides, correct? So I have x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 102. Now let's see if 102 breaks down. I have 102. 2 goes into 102 51 times. Just 2 go into 51? No. 3 goes into 51 17 times. Does this help us at all? Does this simplify at all? Nope. There's our answer. Good job. What am I going to do with 11? I'm going to move the 1 over. So this becomes x squared minus 4x plus the box equals what? Negative 6 plus the box, right? Take your b term. So my b term is negative 4 divided by 2 gives me negative 2, right? So what does my parenthesis on the left-hand side look like? X minus 2 squared, good, x minus 2 squared. And then I'm adding what to both sides? 4. Negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2, okay. Now what? Take the square root. Right now, when I just put the square root on, what did you guys just learn about your solutions?
No solution.
There's no real solutions. What kind of solutions are we going to have? Imaginary. You guys are going to have to go past this point starting Monday. So let's just go ahead and look at it for a second here. I have x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 2. How do you know that your solutions are imaginary? Because there's a negative underneath the square root. All right, if you guys stopped here today, I'm okay with it. After Monday, we have to keep going because the square root of negative 2 is the same thing as negative 1 times 2, right? Does anybody remember what the square root of negative 1 is?
I.
It's I. So this would be I square root of 2. So when we added 2 to both sides, you guys would have x equals 2 plus or minus I square root of 2. How many real solutions are there? Real. None. They're both what? Imaginary. Okay. Really important that you guys can see that. All right. Let's see. What else do we got? Hold on. Okay. We look at 15. And we're thinking to ourselves, whoa. Personally, I would just move everything to one side to take a look at it. And I'd say, can I even do this? So I'm going to move everything over. And I'm going to say 5x squared plus 20x minus 60 equals 0. Everybody okay with that? Now, what at the very beginning, what did we talk about our a term needing to be? 1. Can I divide everything by 5? All right, let's see what happens when I do that. 5, 5, 5. I have x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals what? 0. Can I factor this? Are there factors of negative 12 that'll multiply to give me negative 12 and add to give me 4? Yes. We can also complete the square. If we complete the square, we'd have x squared plus 4x plus our box equals 12 plus the box, right? Your b term is 4 divided by 2, which gives me 2. So my parenthesis over here is x plus 2 squared. What goes in each box? 4 and 4. Now what? Just take the square root. When I put the square root on, what goes in front of my answer? Plus or minus. Minus 2. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus 4. Can I get a solid answer from this? Yes. Negative 2 plus 4, negative 2 minus 4. So I get 2 and negative 6, which is what you guys told me from the very beginning. But you can try to see if you can make everything. You've got to get that a term to be 1. You can complete the square when a is not 1. We're just not going to. It gets into fractions and it's just not cute, so we're not going to do it. All right, let's look at 17. Let's just move everything over just to look at it for a second. 8x squared plus 16x minus 42 equals 0. So we want our a term to be what? 1. What number do you see goes into all 3 of these?
8.
Does 8?
No, 2.
2 goes in.
Did Terry Moore get to class?
Yes, he just came in from guidance. Thank you. Does 8 go into all of these? Which is what we would need to happen in order for us to complete the square nice and pretty, right? So if you're not going to be given a problem like this. But if you were given a problem like this to complete the square, you would not be able to. Now, yes, you can, guys. I'm telling you, it is mathematically possible, but it's not what we're going to be doing. We're only going to do this when it's pretty and no fractions. So if you got to a problem and you tried to factor it and it didn't work, then you tried to complete the square and it didn't work, what formula would you have to use? The quadratic formula. Okay, you guys can stop right there with that one. Same thing is going to happen with 18. Same thing's going to happen with 20. You're okay with 19. You guys can do 19. But let's look at 21. Is my a term 1? No. Can I divide everything by my a term and get it to be 1? Okay, so let's do that. N squared plus n equals, whoops, I was moving it too. Plus 9 equals 0. Agreed? Okay, so we'd have n squared plus n plus our box equals negative 9 plus the box, right? I take my b term, which is
1.
and I divide it by, see what happens? I don't write any more of this. Then I would have n minus 1/2 squared equals, when we square 1/2, it becomes 1/4. So you'd add 1/4. Does anybody want to do that? No. You guys are like, no, stop it. Okay, so what formula would we have to use here? Quadratic. So what I'm trying to show you is, you guys don't have to do 21. You don't have to do the rest of them. 22, they're all going to be like that. They're going to be yucky. Nope. I just wanted to show you guys that what'll happen. The reason you don't have to is because the directions say to complete the square, and we're not doing any completing the square with fractions.
Even 19.
Yes.
So if it comes up on, oh, it's not gonna come
It won't. On your test, I will tell you, because I'm making it, solve this equation by completing the square, and it'll work out just fine. Solve this equation by using the quadratic formula, and it'll work out just fine. But I'm just trying to show you, if you come to an SAT or ACT question, it just says solve, you should always try to factor it first. That's the easiest way. Then try completing the square if A is 1. And if all else fails, what do we go to? Go to the quadratic formula. All right, let's go to, I want to do a couple of these with you. All right, let's do a couple quadratics. Guys, the quadratic formula, some of the last period said, this is so much easier for me. Okay, I get that. But you have to learn all the different ways. It is so very important for you guys to practice. I'm going to do 2 of these with you, and then I'm going to let you guys work on your own. You can work together. I'll sit with you if you want me to. You guys have to get into the practice of doing it, not just watching me do. So if I tell you to solve using the quadratic formula, can I just go ahead exactly how my question is written and tell you what A, B, and C is? Yes or no? No. Everything has to be set equal to what? 0. I've got to move this 5 to the other side. So this becomes 2x squared minus 3x minus what? 20. Good. Equals 0. Now we can solve using the quadratic formula. So I say my A term is 2, my B term is -3, and my C term is -20. Agreed? All right, now let's take our time. The first thing I want you to do is write your formula. X equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. What is that b squared minus 4ac called? We talked about it yesterday. The discriminant. Good. What does it tell me? How many solutions and what type they are. Good. Very good, guys. So now just take your time. No reason to skip steps. No reason to be like, well, can't I put 2 negatives and make it a positive? Just write everything the way you see it, and then we'll worry about simplifying. So -3 plus or minus -3 squared minus 4 times A is 2, C is -20, all over 2 times 2. Agreed? Okay. Now scoot a little bit. We're just going to simplify. We're going to make it a little smaller. What's a -3? +3 plus or minus. What is -3 squared? 9. What's -4 times 2? -8 times -20. Positive 160. And then what's 2 times 2? Okay. On your test, it probably, when it's the quadratic formula, will not work out pretty. This one does. That's why I want to do it with you guys so you don't get confused. So 3 plus or minus, what's 9 plus 160? 169. Does anybody know anything about 169? It is a perfect square. So you can keep simplifying here. You can say, okay, I have 3 plus or minus. Well, it's 13 over 4. So I have 2 problems. I have 2 numerators. I have 3 plus 13, which is what? 16 over 4. And I have 3 minus 13, which is what? -10 over 4. So I can simplify here. My 2 x's are x equals 16, God bless you. 16 divided by 4 is 4. And what can I reduce -10 over 4 to? -5 over 2. On your test, you will probably have something that works out like the first question did, where it was like -7 plus or minus the square root of 87, because that's why we really use the quadratic formula. But I just want to show you, at sometimes you guys might be given a question that it works out, oh, nice and pretty.
Wait, I have a question.
Uh-huh. You have 3 plus 13, which gives me 16. And you have 3 minus 13, which gives you negative 10. Yeah, no, you're fine. Good question. All right, let's do one more. If I told you to solve this, what would you do?
Divide by 5.
Perfect. Divide both by 5. R squared. What's 80 divided by 5? 16, right? And now do what? Take the square root. So what's R equal?
4 plus or minus 4.
Plus or minus 4. Okay, that took us about 23 seconds. But this question tells you to solve using what? Quadratic formula. I'm not going to give you one of these on your test. I'm going to give you one that has A, B, and C terms. But I want you guys to see why it's important to learn a couple different ways to solve. That took us 2 seconds to do. But if the only way you know how to solve a quadratic, something that has a squared, is with the quadratic formula, this is what we'd have to do. We'd have to rewrite it as 5. We'll say r squared minus 80 equals 0, right? Okay, so what's your A term? What's in front of r squared? 5. What is your B term? What's in front of r? 0. There isn't one. And then what's your C term? Negative 80. Okay. So my quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I have negative 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times a is 5 and c is negative 80. Agreed? All over 2 times 5. Everybody with me? Okay, so let's simplify. I have negative 0, which is just 0, plus or minus, what's 0 squared? 0. What's negative 4 times 5? Negative 20. And then negative 20 times negative 80 is 1,600. And I'm dividing all this by 10. Can I just go ahead and say, oh, 10 will cross out with 1,600 and get the square root of 160? No. It's against the law. So I still have 0 plus or minus. What is the square root of 1,600? What's the square root of 16? 4. 40. Okay. So this is plus or minus 40 over 10. Now can I cross out the 0?
Yes.
So I'm left with plus or minus what?
4.
Is that what we got over here?
Yeah.
Which would you rather do? Better 1 or 2? We're at the eye doctor. Better 1 or 2? 1, right? So that's why, guys, I cannot impress upon you enough how important it is to learn all the different ways to solve. Because from now on, after this lesson, after Thursday's test, you're just going to be given equations that say solve. So do it with the method that you know best and that works best for whatever situation you are presented with. That make sense? Okay, I will upload this.